There's a quiet war going on, and most people never notice it. It's not the war fought on battlefields, nor the kind that makes headlines. It's the war of a woman, alone, unsupported, overlooked. No cheering crowd, no backup plan, no one to call when everything falls apart. She wakes up every morning not because she's rested, but because she has no other choice. And that is strength. That's discipline forged in fire. That's the kind of resilience that can't be taught in a classroom. It's learned through raw experience, through survival. People don't understand the weight of silence, the kind of silence that follows her around when she's crying on the inside, but still shows up, still works, still gives, still cares. And what happens when no one comes to save her? She learns to become the hero in her own story. This isn't some romantic tale of empowerment. It's brutal, it's raw, it's the transformation of pain into purpose, of fear into clarity, of chaos into order. Because the truth is, support is a luxury, but responsibility, that's a necessity. And responsibility, when embraced fully, becomes the path to meaning. When a woman has no support, she has two choices: collapse or construct herself from the ground up. And the ones who rise in silence, they are the most dangerous to mediocrity. They don't complain. They don't seek validation. They build themselves quietly until they are too powerful to ignore. Most people think strength is loud, but strength isn't noise, it's restraint. It's staying composed when every fiber of your being wants to give up. It's saying, I will try again tomorrow, even when today was unbearable. A woman who has faced abandonment, betrayal, poverty, and loneliness, and still chose to keep her integrity intact is a pillar of civilization. She's not waiting for permission. She's not blaming anyone. She looks the truth in the eye and says, I will not be broken. Not because it's easy, but because the alternative, bitterness, resentment, defeat, is even harder to live with. What you don't see behind her quiet demeanor is a lifetime of self-regulation, of doing what's necessary, of choosing responsibility over escape, of showing up even when her body is tired and her heart is shattered. And here's the real power. It's not just about surviving, it's about becoming someone so capable, so internally fortified, that no external circumstance can destroy her foundation. That is the silent victory. That is the transformation. And if you're listening to this right now, and you've been walking alone, carrying burdens no one sees, let this be your reminder. You're not invisible. You're not weak for feeling broken, but you are extraordinary for not letting that brokenness define you. Because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people like you, people who face their dragons, not to slay them once and for all, but to become stronger every time they do. Stand up straight, shoulders back, face the world. You weren't meant to stay small, you were meant to rise. There is something uniquely tragic and yet astonishingly heroic about a woman who walks through life without a net beneath her, no father to protect her, no mother to comfort her, no partner to share the burden. No system that catches her when she falls. She moves through the world with a kind of quiet urgency, and nobody really sees it. Yeah, but that's the point, isn't it? That's the silent part of the battle. When there's no one to witness your suffering, it either crushes you or forces you to become unbreakable. Now imagine waking up every day in a life where no one tells you that what you're doing matters. No applause, no recognition. Just expectation. The world looks at her and assumes she'll hold it all together. And when she does, they say nothing. And when she slips just once, they call her unstable. This is the madness of being unsupported and yet responsible. She doesn't get the privilege of weakness. She has to be reliable even when she's unraveling. And that is the kind of suffering that doesn't show up on a medical report or in a statistic, but it eats away at the soul like a slow, corrosive drip. And you might ask, how does she endure this? How does a person keep going when no one's clapping, when no one's checking in, when no one's even watching? The answer is both brutal and beautiful. She keeps going because the alternative is worse. She understands at some primal level that giving up doesn't just mean rest, it means collapse, it means entropy, it means death. Not literal death, but the death of self-respect. And for someone like her, that matters more than anything. Her dignity is all she has. So she carries it like armor, even when it's heavy, even when it chafes. There is an ancient mythological strength in a woman who stands up when everything inside her says, lie down. Think about that. Think about what it takes to walk into work, to smile, to answer emails, to raise children, to pay bills, to cook dinner, and to do it all knowing that there is no backup, no escape plan, no one coming to rescue her if she breaks. She's walking on a tightrope and no one is even holding the net. The sheer mental weight of that is incomprehensible unless you've lived it. And society does this cruel thing. It praises independence, especially in women, until that independence is inconvenient, until it makes people uncomfortable, until it reminds them that they've been absent. Then suddenly, that same strength is called coldness. That same determination is labeled as bitterness. She's told she's too intense, too serious, too much. But what's the alternative? Would you rather she fall apart so you can feel comfortable? Would you rather she become dependent so you can reassure yourself that she's manageable? And here's the deeper, more painful irony. Many women in this situation don't even know how extraordinary they are because no one tells them. No one points at them and says, what you're doing is heroic. Because heroism, in their case, doesn't look like action movies or Nobel Prizes. It looks like showing up on a Monday morning after a weekend of silent crying. It looks like paying rent with the last $20 in the bank and still giving the best part of their sandwich to their child. It looks like swallowing anxiety and pretending to be okay so no one else gets worried. And none of that gets medals. None of that gets recognition. But it should. We live in a time where we are obsessed with the performance of strength, but indifferent to the reality of it. Real strength doesn't post about itself. It doesn't market itself. Real strength is the woman sitting alone in her car before her shift, taking deep breaths, preparing to give the world her best even when she has nothing left. That's strength, and it's not glamorous and it's not loud, but it is the bedrock of civilization. And let me say this, when a woman builds herself without help, she doesn't just build a life, she builds a philosophy. She understands responsibility. She understands delayed gratification. She understands the value of character because that's all she had to rely on. And that makes her dangerous, not in a harmful way, but in a way that makes mediocrity tremble. You can't manipulate her easily. You can't guilt her into silence because she has faced worse than your disapproval. She has faced herself and survived. What does it do to a person when they're forced to become both the protector and the protected, both the nurturer and the disciplined hand? It creates a kind of psychological wholeness that most people never reach because they're never pushed that far. Pain, real pain, if faced honestly, refines the soul. It strips away illusion. It eliminates entitlement. It forces you to become precise with your time, with your boundaries, with your energy. And that precision, that self-awareness, that makes her terrifyingly competent. But competence is lonely. There's a sorrow that comes with being the strong one because everyone leans on you and you're trained to never lean back. She could be surrounded by people and still feel like she's holding up the room by herself because in a way she is. She has become so reliable that others stop checking in. And that's the tragic cost of strength, invisibility. People only see the mess. They don't see the maintenance. They don't see the battles you didn't have to fight because she already fought them before anyone noticed. She absorbs chaos. That's her role. That's her burden. And in those rare, quiet moments when she's finally alone with her thoughts, it hits her. No one really knows how hard it's been. And maybe no one ever will. But that doesn't stop her. Because she's not doing it for praise. She's doing it because she refuses to abandon herself. She refuses to let her circumstances dictate her character. She refuses to let the absence of support justify the presence of self-destruction. That's integrity, and integrity is a form of grace under pressure. So the next time you see a woman who looks like she has it all together, look again, look deeper. Because the truth is, she might be in the middle of a war no one can see, a war she fights every single day without backup, without sympathy, without rest, and she's still standing, still giving, still showing up. That is not just resilience, that is transcendence. That is the silent battle of a woman with no support. And it may very well be the most powerful force you'll ever encounter. Chaos is not some abstract concept. It's not something distant or theoretical. Chaos is the laundry piling up when you're too exhausted to care. It's the unexpected phone call that brings bad news. It's a missed paycheck, an argument with someone you love, the aching loneliness that creeps in when the world goes quiet. It's waking up with anxiety clawing at your chest and still having to make breakfast. Chaos is life, unfiltered and raw. And when you're alone, when you have no one to help structure it, chaos becomes your closest companion. But meaning is what emerges when you face that chaos voluntarily, not by choice perhaps, but by necessity. You don't conquer chaos by running from it. You confront it, and in doing so, you become more than you were. That's the core of the transformation. That's what most people don't understand. They think life is about happiness, about comfort, about peace. But it isn't. Life is about bearing, and in some rare, deeply honest moments, even redeeming the suffering that is fundamentally unavoidable. And when you don't have support, when no one is coming to save you, that truth reveals itself fast and without mercy. People often ask, how do I find meaning? But that's the wrong question. You don't find meaning like you find your keys. Meaning is something you build, and you build it in the fire, in the struggle, in the mundane, difficult, unglamorous work of doing what is necessary, especially when you don't feel like it, especially when no one is watching. Meaning is cultivated by choosing responsibility over resentment, by waking up and deciding again and again that you will not let yourself fall into the pit, even when the pit looks comfortable, even when surrendering feels justified. There is a peculiar dignity in doing what must be done without complaint. And there is a deeper kind of power that comes from taking personal responsibility, not because you caused the problem, but because you refuse to be destroyed by it. That's what real transformation looks like. Not becoming someone new, becoming someone real, someone whole, someone who has looked at their suffering honestly and said, this will not define me, but it will refine me. And that's where competence comes in. Competence is not a given, it's earned. It's painstakingly acquired through trial, error, and unrelenting repetition. It's not a talent. It's not a gift. It's a skill forged in pressure. And for a woman with no support, competence is survival, because she cannot afford the luxury of ignorance. She can't fall back on someone else, so she learns through necessity how to manage money, how to regulate her emotions, how to plan, how to repair, how to negotiate, how to say no, how to endure. She becomes sharp, precise, functional. And there is something deeply noble about that process, even if the world doesn't see it. But with competence comes isolation, Because as you grow stronger, more capable, more reliable, people start to expect it. They stop checking in. They stop offering help. They assume you're fine. And that's the paradox. The better you are at holding it together, the fewer people realize how heavy it actually is. So you walk through life carrying this unspoken burden, being everything to everyone and nothing to yourself. And it wears on you. It chips away at your softness. But at the same time, it makes you formidable to carry that kind of responsibility day after day, year after year, changes a person. It forces you to choose between bitterness and transformation, between victimhood and growth, between chaos and order. And the only sustainable path, the only path that leads anywhere worth going, is the one paved with meaning, not comfort, not avoidance, meaning. And meaning comes from aiming at something higher than your suffering, from deciding that even if everything falls apart, you won't, from building a life so solid, so structured, that the storms can't take it away. You don't get there by accident. You get there by sacrifice. You give up the fantasy that someone else will fix it. You stop waiting for permission. You stop looking backward and you start walking forward. One brutal, deliberate, meaningful step at a time. You put your life in order not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. And in doing so, you create a kind of psychological stability that most people only dream of. That's the reward. Not fame, not praise, but self-respect. The deep, unshakable knowledge that you've become someone reliable in a world that often isn't. And don't make the mistake of thinking this path is emotionless. It isn't. Be constantly, in fact, it demands more emotional depth than any other. You have to feel it all fully, the grief, the fear, the anger, the fatigue, but you don't let it paralyze you. You don't drown in it. You acknowledge it, integrate it, and then move. Because you understand that emotions are signals, not dictators. And if you obey them blindly, you'll remain stuck. But if you learn from them, you'll grow. Growth is painful, and transformation even more so. It requires the death of old patterns, old identities, old illusions. And when you have no one to buffer you from that pain, it burns. But that fire also purifies. It burns away the unnecessary, the shallow, the performative. What's left is real. What's left is resilient. What's left is you, raw, refined, and capable. And when you become that person, something incredible happens. The world starts to shift, not because it changes, but because you do. You start to see differently. You start to act differently. You begin to inspire, not through words, but through presence. People begin to trust you, not because you demand it, but because you've proven yourself. And in a world of noise, someone who is solid, grounded, and competent becomes a lighthouse. But the truth is, none of this comes without a price. You lose things along the way, innocence, naivety, maybe even relationships that can't tolerate your growth. But what you gain in return is worth it. You gain clarity, strength, purpose. You gain the capacity to stand up, not just for yourself, but for others. You become someone who can bear the weight of responsibility without collapsing, someone who can walk into chaos and create order, not because it's easy, but because it's right. That's what meaning offers. That's what responsibility produces. That's how competence is born, through repeated acts of courage in the face of fear, through deliberate movement toward what is difficult but necessary, through the refusal to let your circumstances define your character. That is the silent revolution. That is how transformation occurs. Not all at once, but moment by moment, decision by decision, sacrifice by sacrifice. The path isn't comfortable, but it's real, and the person who emerges at the end of it is unshakable, not because they've avoided suffering, but because they've integrated it and turned it into strength.